We talked last week, and you were telling me that you did a reflection after reading a post that Rod Hochman had put on the Providence blog, and it was about immigration.
This message that Dr. Rod Hochman had sent out, it happened on a very historical day. It was the day that the Supreme Court had ruled to continue DACA. It allowed almost 800,000 young people known as dreamers to avoid deportation and remain in the United States. He had mentioned that some of the Providence caregivers are dreamers. I am an immigrant. I was born in El Salvador and I came to the United States here undocumented. And I was just incredibly moved because I've never been more proud to work for an organization that follows its mission and supports the dignity of all, regardless of wealth, country of origin, skin color, but in this case, legal status. I was just so moved. I came to the United States really, really young without really knowing what my future was going to be like. And so to think that there's people like me in the United States who just want an opportunity for an improved life, I really take to heart.
So how did you respond when you read that?
I wrote a letter to Rod Hochman about just how much it meant to me and how much I was just moved by it. To my surprise, he actually wrote back to me later that same night, just thanking me for his words and just how grateful he was to hear from another Providence caregiver.
Do you want to talk about your early childhood?
I was born in the early 80s, and I don't know if you know much about the history of Central America at that time. There was just a lot of civil war and unrest. Because my family was involved in the Catholic Church, there was just a lot of fear and uncertainty. One night in the early 1980s, I was really young. A group of military men came into the house of my grandmother and they took my grandfather away.
Oh my God.
We don't know why. All we know is that it had to do with his involvement with the Catholic Church because he often spoke up about social injustice and protecting the poor people of El Salvador and just having a voice for them. So my grandfather disappeared that night and we never found him again. We quickly gathered our things and we left the country in the middle of the night. It was with my mother and my two brothers and grandma with her young children. So without any knowledge of what we were going to be walking into or where we were going, we really just relied on faith. I lived in the basement of a church. So I lived in a little bedroom with my mom and my two brothers. So the four of us in this little teeny house with my aunts and uncles. So there was about 11 family members in this like 2-bedroom basement. But, you know, I had a great childhood. I had a lot of family support. I grew up with hand-me-down clothes and toys. But to me, I was just really loved. I grew up in Spokane and I never felt deprived, just really loved. And what I learned more than anything was how important faith is, trusting that there are good people there that just want to help. I just want to do that as well. I want to be a good person. I want to help. I always think, is there someone else who's not as fortunate as me that I can in turn try to help? So, that's why, because I wasn't a legal resident in the United States, I was undocumented. I did live with the fear of deportation. I did go to school, but I remember my mom's like, don't talk to anyone. Don't tell anyone about, anything about you. You just go do your work. So I think that's part of why I didn't share too much, was because there was always that guidance that not to overshare. So we did, when I was a teenager, become legal resident. And I remember my mom studying to become a U.S. citizen. When I was 16 years old, she took the citizenship test and became a U.S. citizen. And then we shortly followed that.
So how did you end up here?
I went to college. I actually have a bachelor's in occupational therapy. I have a master's in public administration, both from Eastern Washington. I ended up working at Sacred Heart in Spokane, which is a Providence hospital. I just loved my time there at the hospital. Once I had my first child, I have 2 daughters, I decided to go into home health. I did go work for a different home health company, and I worked for them for about 5 years. Shortly after that 5 years, a position opened up to be a clinical manager in home health for Providence in Everett, Washington. So my family and I, we moved over to the Seattle, Washington area, and I took the position as a clinical manager working for Providence and just immediately felt at home. I wanted to be a Providence employee. because I just loved the mission and the promise. Know me, care for me, ease my way. Other agencies may not take these patients, but our ministry does, because we don't leave anyone behind. We try to serve all, regardless of the situation, and just seeing the different programs that we could offer. So I lived in Washington most of my life, but a year ago, I had an opportunity to take a position in Southern California, and it was to be an executive director for 2 locations, Torrance and Burbank. When I first came home to tell my husband about this position that was opening and whether we should consider it, his first response was like, "No, what are you talking about? We are not moving to California." And my initial thought was not, because I loved Everett. So after talking to my husband about it for many, many, many weeks, we came down a few times, checked out, and 6 months later, packed up my house, my family, and we moved to Southern California. So here we have been about 15 months now, and loving it, Melody. I don't regret the decision at all.
It's so funny that you talk about concern about integrating into those ministries, just because I know you.
I was really worried about it, but the culture of Providence, it really doesn't matter the location and the service line. It's there. And what we have committed in serving our community, what we do to support our organization, and carrying the legacy of the sisters before us is ingrained in the culture. So I just felt right at home. I just realized it was an extension of the Providence family. It's what fuels my soul every day.